I started shooting high definition home video back in 2006. The format I was using at the time was HDV and it was recording at 1080i. Now if I look back at that footage nowadays and put it up on my big television, it still looks pretty decent. But the camcorder we're going to talk about today came from just a few years before then, 1998. And the footage that this thing records looks like it might as well have been from 20 years before. In fact, enough chit chat, let me show you what it looks like now. Right, welcome to 1998, or at least the version of 1998 that the owners of this particular camcorder captured. We've got muted colours, poor low light capabilities, a 4:3 aspect ratio, narrow field of view, mono sound and an analogue output. Now this wasn't my camcorder, I'm going to show you it in a moment. It's something I picked up off eBay because it's a bit of a technical curiosity. Now 2 years before this came out, so in 1996, this is the camcorder I was using. It's a mini DV camcorder, one of the first ones. I remember when I took it to Disneyland that year, I kept getting stopped by people who had these big camcorders on their shoulder with a full-size VHS tape in them. They said, "Is that a camcorder?" I went, "Yes, it is." And I had to keep getting the tape out of it to show everyone that it was actually a camcorder using the new mini DV format. So just think, this is 2 years before the camcorder that I'm going to show you. Now at the time, this was the smallest camcorder on the market. The camera that I'm going to show you was 1998's smallest camera, and it's from Sony. Now in their attempt to get the smallest camcorder on the market, I think that they pretty much threw out the baby with the bathwater, but we'll just have a look at it in a little bit more detail. The model number is the CCD-CR1, more commonly referred to as the Ruvi. Now when you look at the overall design, it's a little bit unusual for the time. It looks more like a compact digital stills camera of the era rather than a video camera. Now when you compare the size of it against my JVC Mini DV camera, it is a little bit smaller. The dimensions are a little bit less, but not massively so, if that's not a contradiction in terms. However, this camera does have the benefit of having an LCD screen on the back of it, whereas my JVC Mini DV camera had a viewfinder on the top. Now let's just have a look at the camera all round. We'll just do a quick tour of it. We've got a lens cap here which folds back and out of the way. Next to the lens is a mono microphone. And if we just look at the bottom, we've got a tripod screw mount. The batteries go in here. It did come with lithium batteries and a charger, although I don't have those. So fortunately it does work on 2 AA batteries as well. Now the screen on the back can be folded up, which is something sort of more common on more recent cameras. In fact, if you fold it all the way around, it will do what would now be referred to, of course, as a selfie. We've got the buttons here for backlight. Now that's not backlight for the screen, that's if someone stood in front of a light behind them and you put that on and it compensates for that. A switch here has 3 different video modes. 1, it'll record for 5 seconds and stop. 2, it'll record while you hold the button down and then stop when you let go. And 3 is the more common, press to start recording, press to stop recording that you get on most cameras nowadays. If you slide this forward, underneath here are the transport controls. To the left of those we've got photo scan, which will show your photos one after the other that you've taken using the photo button on the right, and an end search will find the end of the recordings that you've made. Now the screen on the back of here isn't like screens you get nowadays. It's a reflective screen. It needs light to shine on it so that you can see it. In fact, it's on now and it's quite hard to see. So you can imagine that shooting indoors in a low light environment would be quite tricky with this camera because you'd have difficulty seeing what was on the screen, although it doesn't record very well in low light anyway, so perhaps it doesn't actually matter. You can overlay your video with a time and date stamp, and I've got a video in here that somebody shot earlier on. You can't really make out very well what it's of, although you can hear because it's got a built-in speaker. Of course, the idea is that you get the video out of the camera over the analog outputs, which is a composite video and also a mono audio, and then you put that into a television or into another video recorder to edit it down. It's got a 3x optical zoom in this, but it's an optical zoom that's mechanical. It's not using any motors. By sliding this lever on the right, you actually move the lenses about inside, so it's quite tricky getting a nice smooth zoom with this one. Now, there is some footage in here that's from the previous owner, so I'd like to show you some of that now.
Took 400 years to complete. The oldest part, the 4 central towers, the White Tower, the original Norman keep. If you look on the... Well folks, if you look around you now, you can see the changing face of our old River Thames. London, or if not, done. Anyway, thanks very much for your... If you wish, as you leave the boat, I'll be standing by the gate with the old...
So as you can see, this is the video of somebody's trip to London back in October 2000. Assuming that date at the bottom there is correct, I don't see any reason why they put the wrong date on it. In fact, the London Eye opened to the public in 2000, so presumably this was a big trip down to go on the London Eye, as well as the Thames cruise. Now the video quality is very washed out, the colours are very muted. I know it's October, but still you get better quality video of course than this nowadays, but this is pretty much what we'd expect for 1990s, late 90s video technology. Most people's home videos look something like this from that era, which is why when I uploaded that video of New York in HD in 1993, it got so many people quite interested, because you don't tend to see that kind of video quality from the 1990s. It's a lot more like this kind of stuff. And needless to say, there's no stabilisation on this camera. One thing I should point out, you know there's that photo button, I mentioned photos. Well, the photos really are just still video frames. In fact, here are some now. Each one of them plays for 5 seconds and is accompanied by the audio that would have been recorded during those 5 seconds. The camera that I've got, I picked up off eBay, it seems to come from a chap who was doing some sort of letting out of properties and was taking photos of the different locations and things. Not very interesting things to look at, but it gives you an idea of the quality, which of course those aren't photos, it's just video still frames, very, very soft. So what did the camcorder market look like at the time that the Ruvi came out? Well, I mentioned earlier on that there was VHS camcorders that used full-size VHS tape. Usually those were given out by places as rentals, so that when you went to a theme park, you'd rent one of these big cameras, record on a full-size VHS tape, and then take it home so you could play it on your normal VHS player. As far as camcorder-specific formats go, it's a little bit of a Wild West. We've still got a lot of analog formats. We've got VHS-C, SVHS, we've got Video 8 and High 8, and then we're just getting into the digital era with Mini DV. Now, one way manufacturers reduced the size of their camcorders was, of course, with electronic miniaturization and clever use of space, but another way was just to reduce the size of the cassettes they use. So rather than using a full-size VHS, use a Video 8 or a Mini DV, amongst many others. But one thing that those things still share in common is that the cassette mechanism takes up quite a large percentage of the overall volume of any camcorder. So Sony's thought with the Ruvi was, rather than have cassettes in it, don't have any cassettes in it. Don't have a cassette mechanism. You can then shrink it down. You don't need the door. You don't need the eject mechanism. You can do away with all of that, and therefore you can shrink down the overall dimensions of the camera. Okay, so then that leaves the question, what's the camera recording its video onto? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Let's just mention first how long it can actually record for. It can only record for 30 minutes. That's it. That's your maximum amount of record time. Once you've recorded 30 minutes worth of video, shove it in your pocket and take it home. There's nothing else you can do with it. However, it probably doesn't matter too much because the batteries don't last a great deal longer than that amount of time anyway. But once you've got it home, of course, you plug it into the AV lead and record across the 30 minutes worth of video you've done into your video recorder, and then you record over the camera's inbuilt storage again. But what is that inbuilt storage? Well, let me show you. By sliding this little switch up on the front of the camera, you can open the side, and if we look on the bottom here, there's a lever now available that we can move all the way down, and that will pop the center part of the camera out. We just take this section out here, and this is what it's recording onto. This is a Sony video cartridge. Now, according to the manual, the video cartridge can be recorded on hundreds of times, but eventually the quality will start to degrade, at which point you take your camera into a local authorised Sony service facility and they will replace your video cartridge for you. This isn't really a user serviceable part. This is something that you get replaced when it eventually starts to fail. So as you can see, the only exposed part of the cartridge is that metal edge connector. The rest of it is encased in this plastic box. On the other end, we've got a switch here which moves between the record or the save position. It's pretty much like a RetroTech notch. So this little cartridge here can store 30 minutes worth of video, and that's all you can record with your Ruvi. Now, just out of interest, let's see what other cameras were available at the time for a similar price. Well, how much was the Ruvi? Well, I managed to find mention of it in this magazine here, and if we look closely we can see it was like a new item this month, and it was $799 US. I don't know the UK price, but I've got $799 US there. Let's see what other things we can get for a similar price. Well, there's a Sony camcorder at the top there, high 8, steady shot, colour viewfinder, $829. I think I would have paid the extra $30 for that one. As you can see, there's quite a few other cameras to choose from at lower price points. Now, if you were taking photos rather than video at the time this camera came out, you would be taking them on film. There were some early digital cameras, but they were pretty low megapixel ones, like 1.6 and things. So most people were still using film. Now, if you go back and look at those photos you took in the 1990s, they're still going to look pretty decent. However, if you looked at the video you recorded with a Ruvi camera, it's going to look pretty awful, because you'll have dubbed it off the camera onto VHS, which will reduce the quality even more. So you'd be looking at a dub of a pretty poor quality video. Whereas if you'd recorded on mini DV like I did, you could still keep all your tapes like I did, because mini DV tapes didn't cost an awful lot of money. So you could use them once and then just store them away for the future. So if I want to go back to my 1990s video, I've still got the original quality tapes. Whereas if you'd bought a Ruvi, all you'll have now is some poor quality VHS dubs over composite from a pretty ropey quality video in the first place. You've thrown your VHS machine away years ago. All you've got now are these tapes that you've shoved away in a cupboard somewhere. You're never going to see those again anyway. The Ruvi was not the best way you could have spent your money in hindsight, but I know what's killing everyone now. What's in that cartridge? Show us what's in the cartridge. Well, it does say do not disassemble, so we don't want to break that rule. We might get Sony coming after us. However, it does only have these pentalobe screws, so we could open it. Hey Matt, those aren't pentalobe screws, those are blah blah blah. We don't care about your boring facts. We want to get inside this cartridge and have a look. So let's go ahead and do that. Yes, you at the back, you can put your hand down. We already know that you know what's inside one of these. Don't spoil it for everyone else. Let's all enjoy this moment together. And there you go. What's going on in here? Well, believe it or not, the video cartridge is just high 8 tape. Yes, the tape that you could get in the cassettes, just that, high 8 tape, 30 minutes worth, that goes from one reel to the other reel and passes around this record head here. So normally in a tape mechanism, of course, it would thread across there and sort of pull against it. And here it goes around the back of it. As you can see here, you can spin that around. That's just a normal video record head. So when you replace one of these cartridges, you're replacing high 8 tape, which is what's getting worn out after, in quotes, hundreds of recordings, but also you're replacing the record head. This thing is not going to be cheaper as a result. I've got no idea what one of these costs, but that's why you don't have loads of them, because you're replacing a video record head as well as some tape. What a completely bizarre idea. It just really boggles the mind why that was thought to be a really clever idea. There must have been quite a lot of engineering went into that, and what a stupid way to spend your time. I suppose if I'm being fair though, they did lay some groundwork here for later hard disk camcorders which didn't have removable cassettes either, but this is an analog camcorder which just wants you to re-record on that same 30-minute tape over and over again until it breaks, which is pretty bizarre. However, that's why I like it, and that's why we're here doing this video. Now, it didn't stop Sony going for miniaturization after this, although next time round they tried something a little bit more sensible. They went back to the idea of making the cassettes smaller with the MicroMV camcorder, and this is a Sony DCR IP1 camera which I used for quite a number of years and probably is my favourite camcorder I've ever used, although it doesn't really hold up nowadays, of course, when it comes to quality. But back to the Ruvi. The only reason I made this video is because this is unique. It's a one-off. They never went back to using this video cartridge system again after this camera. It was only out for a year or so before they discontinued it because it's such a horribly bad idea, but that's why it's worth making a video about. It's always good to look back on the ideas that didn't really work. And I hope you've enjoyed this video here today, and as always, thanks for watching.